Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Unitarian Church in Fall River. This morning, we will celebrate autumn equinox, what pagans call Mabon, as a time of balance, and we will think about the place of ritual in our lives. Are there any announcements?
Of course, the miracles continues every Friday at 9 o'clock. And our participants are doing all registered now. We're going to do this online. Come on out and continue. It's a very interesting way of checking the mind. Our specialty is diversity in unity, so that we can disagree with each other and hopefully sniff out the truth.
Who's the minister next week? Is it Lisa Kerr?
Yes.
Lisa Kerr will be preaching next week.
The Reverend Lisa Kerr.
The Reverend Lisa Kerr, just ordained over the summer.
To begin our worship service, I would appreciate it if someone would light our chalice. The flame that we light at the beginning of each worship service binds this community, this congregation together as a single family. It's a family that cares for one another and for all who are around us, no matter where we are. Our first hymn is number 73 in our hymnal. I believe it was written by a UU minister who is now emeritus at the Unitarian Church in Columbus, Ohio, Mark Bellatini, number 73, Chant for All Seasons. Sure.
Note that the top line and halfway through the second line, there's a repeat sign, those double lines and dots. So each time you start a verse, you're going to sing the first sentence twice. Summertime has turned, blah, 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 and then you're going to do it again, summertime, still, don't jump seasons until you get to the next verse. Okay, so that first part, sing twice, and then keep going. But I'll play through it so you can.
The repetition is right at the repeat sign in the second stanza. Summertime has turned the star wheel, autumn is upon us. Summertime has turned the star wheel, autumn is upon us. Sweet the angling sun, sweet upon the air, the spell of gloom is rising. Summertime has turned the star wheel, glory is upon us. Glorious the trees, glorious the sight of rust leaves falling, falling. Summertime has turned the star wheel, autumn is upon us. Autumn cold has turned the star wheel, winter is upon us. Autumn cold has turned the star wheel, winter is upon us. Gray the windy storm, cold upon our cheeks, the wet rain glistens, glistens. Autumn cold has turned the star wheel, winter is upon us. Leaping is the fire, golden in the glasses, cider glows like amber. Morning time has turned the star wheel, winter is upon us. Winter rains have turned the star wheel, spring is upon us. Winter rains have turned the star wheel, springtime is upon us. Sharp the smell of loam bursting in her eyes, the tourist of the tulip. Winter rains have turned the star wheel, springtime is upon us. Green is the grass, soft upon the grass, the sunlight warm caressing. Winter rains have turned the star wheel, spring is upon us. Vernal clouds have turned the star wheel, summer is upon us. Vernal clouds is upon us. Gliding are the hawks, hovering above the hot and yellow hillside. Vernal clouds have turned the star wheel. Cricket in the night, chirping on our ears, the sound of moonlit music. Vernal clouds have stirred us on us, summer is upon us. Let us share the covenant of this congregation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship. to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God. Are there joys or concerns to be shared?
Well, I guess it's joy, my birthday on the 15th, especially when he's birthday. So, honored member, still have to mention my father's record of 96. So, I got friends that do that.
Let us join together in prayer. In these uncertain times, the opportunity to become quiet and let those thoughts of others who are not with us physically, but who become present to us in our consciousness. In our quiet meditation, let us welcome them as they make themselves known to us. Embrace them with the love that exists in this congregation, the spiritual church that is a safe haven for all. We will sing Spirit of Life at the conclusion of our meditation. Our responsive reading is number 540 in our hymnal, entitled The Peace of Autumn. These are the words of Rabindranath Tagore. Today, the peace of autumn pervades the world. Spreading over the deserted fields to all horizons its wings of golden green. The many distant villages bask in the sun with eyes closed in idle and languid slumber. In every speck of dust, in every part of my body, in the visible and invisible worlds, let us join together and sing heartily, hymn 343, A Fire Mist and a Planet. A fire mist and a planet, a crystal and a cell, a starfish and a saurian, and caves where ancients dwell. The sense of law and beauty, a face turned from the sun. Some call it evolution, and others call it God. Days on the farm, the cornfields and wild sailing high, and over and lowland, the charm of golden rod. Some people call it autumn, and others call it God. Like tides on crescent sea beach, when moon so new and thin, into our hearts I yearning, come welling, surging in. Come from the mystic ocean, whose rim no foot has trod. Some people call it longing, and others call it God. A mother's heart for you, and Socrates read hymn, and Jesus on the roof, and millions though no nameless, the stray or power be seated. There you have an entire UU theology all in one hymn. At this time, we welcome your gifts for the good works of this congregation. Mabon, the time for balance, seeking balance. Unitarian Universalists are not especially good on ritual. Perhaps the personal theologies are too intellectual, too abstract for that. Like the 7 principles, which for me almost make one gag when you actually say them, even though I suspect most Unitarian Universalists acquiesce to them, hold them as values and guides to behavior they regard as important. I wouldn't go so far as to say UUs regard them as sacred. Perhaps nothing is sacred for UUs except the inviolable belief in freedom of religious thought, absolute freedom. I may be wrong about that. Many UUs do have a ritual of sorts at ingathering, a water communion, in which UUs bring in their own special vial of water and then describe the great travel adventure they had over the summer, tour the great cathedrals of Europe, perhaps a Viking cruise down one of its rivers like the Rhine, trip to Japan to visit Shinto shrines. Whatever they describe, it is guaranteed to make all those who didn't travel over the summer, who had to stay home to work, or to make desperately needed house repairs, jealous. Which is why some congregations have stopped doing the water communion show and tell, or at least made it focus on whatever a person's vial of water symbolizes as spiritually significant in their lives. But by and large, I think UUs are not great on ritual. They kind of participate in some rituals of other faith traditions like Rosh Hashanah, Christmas, Easter. Now I say kind of participate because I do not think many UUs actually share the theology, the religious claims that lie behind those festivals, like Christmas, announcing the birth of the Son of God, begotten, not made, being of one substance with the Father, who for all mankind and for our salvation came down from heaven, was incarnate, perfectly born of the Virgin Mary by the Holy Spirit, who together with the Father will judge both the quick and the dead. It's a rendering of the Nicene Creed. It's always struck me that there is something odd about participating in a religious rite you don't believe in, and it only gets worse at Easter. Of course, at the other end of the spectrum, the ritual spectrum, UUs are sometimes not averse to making up festivals of their own, with meaning no one can share except perhaps the originator of the festival, like Balloon Sunday. The UU Church in Taunton celebrated in February when I was interim minister there. Now, I used to bring my dog Buddy, a Petit Basset Griffon Vendée, a PBGV, to church quite often, because people in the congregation loved his happy face, his friendly disposition, especially the children. And Buddy would be up there next to me watching everyone while I led the service. But on this one Sunday, on Balloon Sunday, everyone was told to bring purple and black helium-filled balloons to the service. And so preaching meant kind of looking out over a sea of purple and black bubbles attached by string to people's hands, which naturally resulted in the balloons bouncing around and sometimes being let go. So the balloons would then rise quickly to the ceiling of the sanctuary, where they would promptly burst with a loud pop. Now, Buddy, brave dog that he was, did not like sudden loud noises, no fireworks, no parades. And so after about the second or third pop, Buddy hightailed it out of there. And I had to go chase him, lest he not stop at the open door and end up out on the street. Balloon Sunday. Actually, UUs have one festival that I like, that I think has meaning, the flower communion. At the end of the church here, where everyone takes home a flower that's not brought by them, becomes a symbol of how others in the congregation hold their person, their unique identity as sacred in a sense that at least each unique individual is worthy of such respect, which is all right by me. Each person is a gift, given a flower anonymously by whoever chooses your flower. UUs try to practice a faith that I believe is aware of nature and its seasonal rhythms, including the autumn equinox that we are celebrating on September 23rd this year, the time when the light of day and darkness of night equal out, come into balance with one another, perhaps become an occasion for us to seek out balance in our lives. And for UUs who are themselves of some level of pagan persuasion. Now, remember, by pagan, I'm referring to those religious traditions that often accept a multiplicity of deities. And of course, you know, the term pagan itself derives from the Latin paganus, which simply means rural, bucolic, based on agricultural cycles. 4th century Christians used the term pejoratively to refer to his citizens of the Roman Empire who practiced polytheism. And so as Western monotheists, it was a critique. But for UUs who are aware of natural cycles and find them significant, they regard the autumn equinox as particularly powerful, as do I. When I was growing up, my father and I used to rake leaves shed by the many giant trees on our property. We'd pile them up in a mound in the center of the circle of our gravel driveway, and then set this mount of leaves ablaze. In those days, there were no laws against burning stuff, and anyway, we were in a rural environment. You couldn't see another house from our house. And while burning the leaves, we'd stick our twigs into the fire and then use them to write cryptic messages against the darkening evening sky with the smoke from the still glowing ember at the end of the wood stick. For pagans, autumn equinox is celebrated as Mabon, especially by Celtic pagans. It's the occasion for practicing agriculturally based traditions. The Druids call the celebration Meant Fomer. It honors the green man, the god of the forest, by offering libations to trees and by partaking of libations, offerings of cider, wines, herbs, using the right fertilizer. These are to help create a kind of internal balance appropriate for this time. Pagans symbolize the endless rotating cycle of seasons on this planet as a wheel of the year, an annual cycle of seasonal festivals that includes the year's chief solar events. And so while solstices represent the two extremes of light and darkness, equinox, or the equinoxes, the two, represent their balance points. And there are various midpoints between them that are based on practices of the growing season and the harvest, and on aspects of animal husbandry, such as the moving of lambs out of their winter pastures into those of spring and summer. Indigenous Americans also celebrate various festivals in conjunction with cycles of the moon. For example, September is the month of the corn moon. The full moon in September corresponds to the time of harvesting corn or barley, and some refer to it as the barley moon. The point is that it is a moon that's nearest the autumnal equinox, where the day is still long enough and bright enough to allow finishing all the harvest chores. Now, for those who live in or near a forest, Mabon can become an occasion for what has come to be termed forest bathing. This is an idea that arose in Japan in the 1980s. It's a physiological and psychological exercise called Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, taking in the forest atmosphere. And the purpose was to offer an antidote to technology burnout, to inspire people to reconnect with and protect our forests that are now important for their benefit as carbon sequesters. But it's not necessary to travel to the Adirondacks or to Costa Rica or New Zealand or Kenya to enjoy pristine forests. You can even do it in your own backyard. Now, for whatever reason, I actually don't remember, but when we bought our house in Mansfield, I began planting trees on our property, and there was already an abundance of trees, natural, actually wild maples and oaks. But over the time of our living there, I've planted this cherry tree just off our back porch, 2 apple trees. You can actually now eat the apples from them. A plane tree, a pear tree, a swamp gum, 2 large oaks, a dogwood, a crabapple, mountain ash, and various semi trees like laurel and rhododendron and magnolia. Dennis Brodeur, who's the arborist from the local tree tech, comes around when we need to deal with one of the neighbor's trees or our maples falling or parts of it after a storm. He tells me that I've created this rare urban forest in the center of Mansfield. But it is a place where I find peace. And especially when looking out the tall windows of our old 150-year-old house at this forest of trees. Now, the green man may come from Welsh mythology. He symbolizes the sap of the trees returning to their roots deep in the earth, changing the green of summer to the fire of autumn, the flaming reds, the oranges and golds. As humans are returning to the darkness from whence we came. Green Man celebrations combine 2 traditions, clearing out and letting go of that which is no longer needed, and planting bulbs and seeds of new things, new plants, new ideas, new hopes that will lie dormant in the dark over the winter until the return of spring. The apple is the symbolic fruit of Mabon. It's associated with beauty, with health. Its seeds within, hidden within, represent rebirth. And sometimes people, pagans within the house, construct a table or an altar decorated with produce that is found in the wild forest or the cultivated field. Apples, pears, elderberries, blackberries, cloudberries, if you live in Norway. Remembering to collect enough seeds and berries for the birds that winter in your area. Most of all, to go for walks, to simply observe as much as nature's wild abundance as you can. I've always been particularly fond of bittersweet, which is an invasive vine. People don't like it. But in the wild, it still produces these lovely yellow and orange burst berries. You can collect the vine and bring it into your home to brighten it. And as symbols of new ideas and hopes, this is an excellent time to plant tree seeds, shrubs, and bulbs. They have all of winter in the darkness to establish and germinate. You can mark each one and make it a hope for you, an idea or an aspiration for spring, and then wait until their first green shows above the ground to remind you of that hope that you pledged. And so the point is that pagan festivals honoring the green man, walking in forests, planting seeds, are highly participative and personal. Each individual is in a position to construct them in ways that are meaningful to them. And so pagans sometimes also speak of one symbol or personification of nature as morphing into another. A modern pagan might say, for example, as awareness grows, the green man becomes an ever-present symbol of rebirth and rejuvenation in the cycle of life, preserving the forest, preserving the habitats of all creatures, protecting vital streams and rivers, cleansing the air, holding space with all the magical creatures of the forest, known as Fae. So some call him king of the Fae, the fairies. Celtic ancestors also worshipped a horned god, Cernunnos. Had great similarity to the Green Man, but you get the idea. You can make autumn equinox as a ritual your own. You can imbue it with meaning that relates to your life, your experience. Just don't turn it into a balloon Sunday or simply the occasion for pumpkin lattes. If you like, honor the Green Man of the forest by offering libations to the trees. I'm not sure what that should look like, but here are some suggestions by pagans. Remove your shoes and feel the energy of the earth through your feet. Listen to the wind slip through the trees and watch as the leaves gently fall to earth. Take a deep breath and feel the air rush through your lungs. Think of how the trees have provided you with cooling shade on a blistering hot summer day, or how you were able to grow delicate herbs or flowers, or how the trees protected them from damage. Feel the warmth from this fire and know that even after death, trees contribute and continue to contribute to our lives. For libations themselves, you may offer ale, cider, wine, and mead. Nothing like a good pot of mead, I always say. It's my best Geordie accent. Mead and golden sweet honey, a gift to humankind from the bees, symbolizing all growing things that bear fruit and need pollination. But as a good you, I cannot end simply without speaking to the complexity of nature. I think that one of the reasons UUs are awkward at ritual and perhaps intellectual and abstract in their expressions of faith is that they convey certain realities, some of which are brought into their lives through science, and that must be incorporated into their religious faith. We think of the soil, for example, of fields and forests being a source for sequestering excess carbon, helping to support creatures whose bodily processes function only within a certain limited temperature range, as do ours. But we must realize that this is a more complex process than we may at first have thought. In the August 19th issue of Science, that's the Journal of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, it's where the best articles of current scientific research get published. It talks about the complexity of soil carbon capture. So when settlers plowed the North American prairie, they uncovered some of the most fertile soil in the world. But tilling those deep-rooted grasslands also released massive amounts of underground carbon into the atmosphere. And more greenhouse gases wafted into the skies when the wetlands were drained, like those that surround New Orleans that I'm familiar with, that never should have been drained, or forests cleared for fields, as in New England. Land conversion continues today, and synthetic fertilizer, diesel-hungry farm machinery, methane-belching livestock are all adding to climate effects. All told, farming, agriculture constitutes about 10% of those emissions that affect our climate in the United States each year. Substantial. Now, Congress wants to turn back the clock and return some of that carbon to the soil. And the idea with the Inflation Reduction Act It included more than $25 billion to expand and safeguard forests, to promote farming practices that are thought to be climate friendly, practices that include no-till agriculture, using cover crops, plants that are cultivated simply to protect the soil. And most agree that paying farmers and training farmers to adopt those measures will improve soil health and water and air quality in the long run. But the question still has to be asked, how much will this slow global warming in the short term? How those practices affect soil's ability to hold carbon depends on a complex interplay between plants, which add organic material to the soil, and the microbes and other tiny organisms in the soil that break down everything they can, which sometimes itself releases greenhouse gases. So planting cover crops such as cowpeas and vetch boosts soil carbon each year by 1/3 of a ton per hectare. But leguminous cover crops like cowpeas and vetch also are adding nitrogen to the soil, which the microbes transform into nitrous oxide, a potential and potent greenhouse gas. So we see how complex nature is as well as being simple when you understand her. Or take another climate-friendly practice, no-till farming. By not plowing fields, farmers protect the topsoil from erosion and save on diesel fuel. At the same time, carbon decreases in deeper layers of certain soils, making the net change small or zero in those places. And during the first decade, no-till fields release higher levels of nitrous oxide as microbes break down the residue of crops. And there's other complications I won't go into, but farmers can't practice no-tilling. Eventually, they have to plow again. All of this is simply to point out that to seek balance, our brains must operate in addressing human and environmental needs and the complexity that they bring with them, as well as our desires and emotions for spiritual wholeness and thinking of nature in a personified way. That on the one hand, we can't just make offerings to the green man and expect nature to take care of things for us on its own. But on the other hand, sometimes letting nature take care of things on its own is precisely what we must do. So we need to get our brains and our spirit in balance. We need to combine the abstract and the emotional, and that is exactly what autumn equinox is geared to do. Our final hymn is number 11, O God of Stars and Sunlight. upon the treetops, we know thy moving hand. O God of cloud and mountain, whose reign on rock is all, thy plan and care and meaning renew the head and heart. Thy word and color spoken, thy summer noons and charms, by these and by thy Son, we know thy world is ours. O God of wood and shade, of boughs above our head, we breathe in thy own breathing, Spirit, Spirit, true. We walk beneath thy blessing, thy seasons and thy way. O God of stars and sunlight, O God of night and day. As you depart the comfort of this sanctuary, go in peace and be a welcome to everyone you meet as you go forth into the week. Go in peace, but as you do, remember, let's be careful out there. And I will enjoy your closing amen.